with to prove that he still got it. It's widely considered the most difficult and the most powerful deck in the meta. I do think he has a bit of a tough matchup on his hands because with the 3 remaining decks, it feels like the Rogue wants to line up into the Shaman wants to beat up on the Priest, and the Priest wants to beat up on the Rogue. But none of these matchups are set in stone. He does have the Octobot in the starter, which we know is amazing versus aggro. But I feel that this is still generally Priest favored because the Rogue has to not only hit Octobot, they have to hit field contact, and the Priest needs to not hit Elucia in my experience.
Yeah, the Priest has just enough like value generation, I think, to be in a good spot if you don't hit the field contact. I think as you are laying out, like when you have the what's the name of it? Deceptor, sorry, I always forget the name of that card. Twilight Deceptor in order to draw through your raised deads. Obviously the Voracious Readers, Gandling on its own can just be an absolute powerhouse if it sticks for a turn. And so Alan full mulling for the field contact to go alongside it, or just some card draw in the form of Shroud of Concealment. This isn't a premium hand from Alan, but it's definitely the kind that can put up a fight.
Yeah, the Garrote and the Shroud of Concealment, not generally things you want to do super early versus Priest. It's not bad to discount the Shroud, and the Garrote can help you close out some games once you've won the board, but it's really difficult to win the board even if you do get an Octobot, because you're not immediately killing them even if you swarm with a lot of small minions on board. The Priest can generally then just take their time pinging. A lot of your 2-cost minions are very weak to the Priest hero power, and if you can't close out the game in that window, the Priest can come back on board just with repeated threats from raised dead. But for Alan, this is already the first crossroads. Does he want to coin out the Octobot? It is guaranteed to go off, but are these enough discounts?
And I love the way he's approaching it. It's like half a second into the turn, he'd grab the coin. You know his first instinct was coin Octobot. And I think it's correct. I think it's still the play you end up making. But I love that he's just taking the entire turn to think about it. There's no rush. You can just consider all through your actions, consider what your next turns might be, because obviously turn 1 and turn 2 turn timers are a little bit shorter. So just making sure he's thinking through everything in what is likely to be still a very powerful start to the game for him. He's putting up a very good fight.
Yes. For okasinnsuke, though, obviously it's a bummer to proc the opponent Octobot, but he gets a nice Wriggling Horror for double value trades here. If you can help it, you don't want to leave a partially damaged Octobot on board because that can be stepped and re-discount the hand. Okasinnsuke holding it down for now, and if any of these minions stick, the Traveling Merchant is going to be quite threatening. Alan right now just going for the dagger because he doesn't quite want to commit the Prize Plunderer this early. I think he's maybe saving up for a big turn where the Plunderer can take down a Merchant or even the 2/4 Frazzled Freshman.
Oh man, but the threats just don't stop coming for okasinnsuke. You know it's a good hand when Void Touched Attendant hasn't been correct until like turn 4. It very rarely comes up that that's the situation. But for Alan, now Shroud of Concealment, absolutely agree. Looking for, I don't know, really anything cheap, maybe a field contact, but realistically, he's going to have to use his 0 mana cards on this turn, I think, to just stay alive.
And so with 1 card played, it makes it a 3 damage Prize Plunderer at best, I think, which is quite short of being able to deal with the Traveling Merchant immediately, but he can Brain Freeze it and then use his dagger to get rid of the Frazzled Freshman, and then the Guardian Og Merchant to get rid of the 2/1 if he puts the Prize Plunder damage on the Frazzled Freshman. But that's his best removal tool used already. So it looks like he's going One Thief instead here. This has the nice benefit of the stealth from the Shroud of Concealment. Wow!
Those are premium options. Flurry obviously gives you another activation of Prize Plunderer, which can get you up to 4 on this turn, so you can technically kill off the Traveling Merchant, or just kill whatever you don't freeze, I suppose.
That's excellent.
Very big.
I think he gets 4 damage on the Prize Splendor, and because he uses Dagger, he's not going to kill it immediately. But wow, the full hold on that. Obviously, the Flurry only freezes 1 minion at the moment. Maybe Alan's holding out for an even bigger swing, which you often have to do versus Rogue. If you go for incremental board clears, they can use their ping and their own Og Merchants to deal with the board. But it's a bit risky because this is a lot of damage coming faced with the Void Touched Attendant. Rogue with no way to heal. Okasinnsuke might be just weaving in the pings every turn, but now with this prep off the top, it's a huge Plunderer, and we'll see what he gets from the second one. Thief, another Flurry, wow.
Is that even good? Like, I suppose you can use prep to just prep the Garrote in order to have played another card for 0 mana. like you probably do end up on Flurry and just killing and freezing everything you can, but it's still the kind of hand that just needs a little bit of extra value.
Yeah, with the prep, I do think the Netherwind portal does make sense. He still can spend all his mana here. Kazakus wasn't going to be playable anyway. But yeah, with the Flurry and the Og Merchant, this does get to be, I think, a 5 damage Prize Plunderer.
Yeah, it's already at 5, so you can get up to 6 if you want. Yeah, obviously 5 is all you need.
It turns out then that because of this Flurry freeze on the big target, Alan actually wastes some damage with his Prize Plunder. He would rather have frozen the 4-5, honestly, as the best target and 2-4 as a decent one, but deviates to remove the most immediate damage from the board. The Neverwin Portal, not super effective in this situation versus Shadow Priest, but it is causing okasinnsuke to evaluate, right? Both Oasis Ally and Ice Barrier would be pretty annoying from his perspective. I don't think any of it should deter him from going face, though.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Ally is the really big one because, as you said, the downside of leaving this board in play are not really that high. Like if they want to shadow step something, that's probably fine because you're not clearing everything anyway, unless you want to go trade and hero power on both the Wand Thieves. But realistically, you just have to pray that Alan doesn't have any powerful follow-up, no more value to come down alongside this. But Kazakus for probably a 1-cost golem is a lot of immediate tempo and value.
And that's why this Guardian Og Merchant is pretty clutch for okasinnsuke. Just any way that lets him remove more minions. I think this ping should go on the other Og Merchant as well. That doesn't involve him attacking would be good for okasinnsuke here to mitigate any Kazakus outs. It mitigates Shadow Step targets as well, and also just gets him further ahead on board. It's not the point of the game yet where okasinnsuke can win simply on pings. It would take 6 pings from here without any additional burst. Oh, 1-cost golem has to come out for Alan here, otherwise he's dead on board, I think.
Trade with his Wand Thieves. I think he would be okay. He has the option to go for 5, but I agree. I think it's probably just a little bit too risky. So Rush here, if he did go for 1, looks pretty good to kill off another one of these 1 health minions.
Freeze is a little bit awkward to curate because he only gets 2 trades before he can get the freeze, so he can narrow it down to a 50-50 on the 5-5. Took taunt, interesting. Oh.
Misses.
Flip though.
Still pretty big. You know, he's taking 5 damage here, but again, if he can clear up the board, what's he at? 7 health now? Like, that's still 4 pings from his opponent. That gives him time to theoretically turn this one around, especially with Kazakus still on the board. You can shadow step it at some point, play it again in order to try and get a lifesteal golem to gain some health. But with a second field contact, he says enough is enough. He's just conceding.
And that was much faster than I would normally expect. I think the Rogue on average should have a couple more removal tools before they have to throw it down there, but that is the downside if you have to go all in with your Octobot before you have the field contact, and I don't think it was wrong for Alan to do so. He had to survive one way or another, but I wonder if he could have maybe saved some health by going for the Prize Plunder on the 4-5. He did like tank 6 damage from that board plus Void Touched Attendant. Early Plunderer also has some utility by just being a 2-1 on board. Like, Priest only has 1 ping per turn. But obviously, it could have made Alan's following turns a bit weaker with less resources. So hard to tell with this Rogue.
It really is, and I think his head is, for the most part, in the right place. Against Shadow Priest, specifically with Garrote Rogue versus Shadow Priest, your instinct should be tank some damage for bigger board swings later. It's less about health when both the Void Shards have been removed from essentially every list, and much more about just guaranteeing that board clear. So saving the field contact, the Prize Plunderer for maybe when you get a Shadow Step later on for a more effective board clear did make sense. But it didn't work out here because his draws were just that little bit too awkward. Prize Plunderers coming down at the worst possible opportunity after he'd already dumped his entire hand. So the counter queue that he has available, of course, because this is last hero standing, is the Quest Shaman. Obviously very happy that he's included this in his lineup at this point, because it's a about as hard of a counter as you can get against the Shadow Priest, maybe excluding Fell Demon Hunter, but it's a great matchup, of course.
Yes, there are many different anti-aggro decks you can sort of consider to fill that role in the LHS lineup, but Quest Shaman has a consistent anti-aggro matchup spread that also doesn't completely concede to combo decks, right? There are certain hands from Quest Shaman that can get their own combos done, or maybe rolling on the rolling on the pressure a bit faster. For Alan, though, this is still not a great spot because he essentially lost on the Q order for the first game with mirrored archetypes remaining. If everything goes according to favored and unfavored, okasinnsuke could potentially come out 3-2 in this series. At some point, Alan has to break serve, as Sottle has called it, and win an unfavorable. For now, though, he's just going to start off with a pretty good matchup, the Perpetual Flame, an insta-keep versus Shadow Priest.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just the dream, especially if you can find yourself some spell damage so that you can clear off the Frazzle Freshman, the 4/4s that come off Gandling as well. That can be a very big difference. And all in all, it's a good hand for Alan. It's a good hand. It's not an insane hand yet because he's missing the likes of, I don't know, One Thief, Guidance, maybe even Investment Opportunity, just a little bit of extra value or cycle to turbo out his quest. But it's not a disaster hand, which is what you need to lose against Shadow Priest most of the time.
Right. I think one piece of cheap overload like that is all Alan needs to really give him a signal to go off with the Perpetual Flame. Now, against Shadow Priest, I find that being greedy with Perpetual Flame can sometimes bite you in the back because the Traveling Merchant can come down on any board that you thought you can maybe leave it up for 1 or 2 more turns. And not only is the Merchant an enormous aggressive threat, it's also going to have a health total that's out of range even with spell damage Perpetual Flame. Alan with the Lightning Bolt has the opportunity to play around that, but it really gets a bit scary when the priest is able to build 2 targets that are out of range, right? Whether it be with a health buff from Kulturan Chaplain or with a Divine Shield. okasinnsuke is going to have that in mind every turn going forward, but the curve is really not simple to him here with that Voracious Reader top deck. I still think he would end up going for Void Touched Attendant though, and just pray that it sticks so that the Merchant can end up protecting that board with its health.
Yeah, I agree. There's obviously consideration for trading the Traveling Merchant, but I think just because your opponent kept 1 card, you really can't have a strong read on it being a Perpetual Flame. And again, even if they do have it, they need spell damage as well in order to be able to guarantee the board clear. So for okasinnsuke, even though you could trade in the hopes of finding a 0-cost card to buff up your Voracious Reader in terms of the number of cards it's drawing, it's just better to go for what is potentially like a 3-mana 5/6 next turn if your opponent can't clear.
Obviously, Alan has the option to clear right now with the Zapper and the Perpetual Flame. It would overload him for 4, which he can immediately unlock by committing the Lightning Bolt. And you would have to send it face then, I guess, which is honestly not the end of the world, right? Because he's then still able to play the Feral Spirit on curve the next turn, and even tempo Fireheart on turn 4 if he's got nothing better to do. I love this from Alan. It's not being too lenient with these resources because he realizes Traveling Merchant the next turn would make his life really difficult. Just take the clear where you can get it, end up ahead on board, you can force the Priest onto a ping turn, and as Shaman, your top decks will only get better as the game goes on. You don't have to be worried about losing resources right now, and playing cards proactively is only better against Elucia as well.
Yeah, I think that holding on to the Coin Lightning Bolt, as you said, is kind of interesting because he could have just gone Coin Lightning Bolt next turn, right? Even though he's... Oh, no, sorry, because it would overload you fully. Sorry, it overloads more crystals than you have. Apologies. Yeah, this is the only way to go about it. And it does mean that okasinnsuke is kind of in a rough spot, as you are expecting to be in against the Quest Shaman, with drawing 2 cards, realistically the best option you have available, and pray that you hit, I don't know, Gandling, Elucia. One of the big legendaries, I think, is what you need to pull yourself back now.
True, and the more Alan continues on this game plan, I think that Elucia will just get worse and worse because Alan's actively looking to play every card he gets off the top immediately. The Overdraft, not quite part of that equation, and because Tempo Fireheart isn't the only option here, I think it's fine to still hold on to her for a couple more turns. Ooh, juicy Revolve.
3 mana, 3/4 revolving, like, it's mainly just to spend the mana after getting a value trade. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think both the 3-4 and the 2-3s will get smaller on average, and Alan loses taunt. So you can say it's not necessarily a net benefit, but he can get a value trade here. And it also just spends his mana, so I don't hate it. The overdraft isn't really doing anything significant here. He could trade that back. But the revolve is maybe also a consideration to hold onto for when the homunculus wakes up, because that is definitely getting smaller.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
If he trades the overdraft, he knows that the 3-4 will eat one of his 2-3s, and then the revolve gets significantly worse, though.
Yeah, I think you can ignore the revolve for the most part here. It's not necessary to use it at any point in this game. The double trade, that is kind of surprising.
I thought he would take a value trade, but then the 3-4 would trade over his 3-3 and the ping would eat the other 2-2. So it kind of ends up similar here. The thing is now Okashinsuke has the ping for the 1 thief though, so I'm not necessarily sure I like the trade.
And although the floated mana means that Okashinsuke did miss 2 damage this time, I think it's reasonable because the top decking exactly a 0 drop is not especially likely. But it works out well for him. Still able to draw 3 cards ahead on board. Raise Dead, Wriggling Horror. These are decent cards to find now.
And for Alan, this is like a net neutral revolve, I should say. The Voracious Reader might become bigger but less threatening because it'll lose the card draw effect. The homunculus should get smaller and the 2/1/1s. Well, I guess the 1/1/1 will definitely just stay a 1/1. Maybe it becomes a tiny fin. But the tour guide will likely get bigger. So I'm not necessarily sure if it's good enough here. The upside is that he gets to guaranteed remove the card draw unless he gets exactly Voracious into another Voracious. That has happened to me before. But he gets to Charged Call, which is a very big deal. I think a 5 or 6 drop on board this turn could help him turn the tide better than your average Fireheart.
I guess, yeah, you're looking for some pretty specific rolls like Lightning Bolt, Perpetual Flame, and hoping it gets very lucky. But that's not what you want to see over 3 drop. I guess it's low attack, which is some solace. And in terms of the 5 drops that he gets, these are both pretty good in Lake Thresher and Totem Goliath. Probably Thresher? Okay.
I also looked at the Thresher just because health on board good, but the Death Rattle from the Totem Goliath is not irrelevant in this matchup. Because you get the Strength Totem, for sure you're getting at least 2 minions that have attack by the end of the turn. Well, I guess not for sure, it could buff the 1/1, but very likely 2 minions that could attack. And against a board full of 1 health minions, the totems could be relevant. Curious that Alan specifically took a 5 drop over a 6 drop though. Makes me think that his head is leaning towards looking for very specific high rolls. Earth Elemental, Raz would be insane here. In Nara, not quite because of the taunt, but it looks like he wasn't satisfied just for going with better on average stats. He wanted something big.
Count your blessings, mate.
Yeah, Okashinsuke once again here doing what Shadow Priest loves to do, which is just very high health minions in board-based matchups like this. Although the 2/5, as I said, it's not especially threatening in terms of damage, it's so tough to clear, and especially when you buff it up here. It's going to need to be a pretty impressive turn from Alan, because otherwise he's losing his counter queue. Overdraft, not the card he wanted to see. We really need some removal here.
It's essentially a free removal on a 2/1 because you spend 1 to unlock 1. But this Torrent will be able to kill the 2/5. I like that.
That's pretty insane. Yeah, we're definitely snapping that up.
A good start. Even if he hits Perpetual Flame for the rest of the board, it's not quite so clean, but honestly, Torrents are the best cards right now. You'll take Lightning Bolts as well, I guess.
Yeah, that less so.
Nothing else playable, which means the train has to stop here.
He could go trade the overdraft, and then if he hits Bloom, Wind Fury becomes okay, right? Because you can take out 2 minions then, I guess.
But I think I'd rather just take the overdraft guaranteed clear 1 minion and then trade the other, as Alan is doing here. Takes the Molten Blast for next turn. He's alive for now. He bought himself a lot of time, has plenty of health to work with, but it's getting close to the point where any Void touched off the top could threaten a 2-turn lethal.
That's always the scary part. He taking 5 this turn down to 13, you're still okay. Again, if you can lock down the board this turn, or at least only leave a couple of attack power, I think you're in a decent spot, especially as there's always the potential for Canal Slogger off the top to just end the game on the spot as soon as that comes down. I do think Alan is probably still winning this game, as long as okasinnsuke doesn't get some of these nutty top decks like Ilusha, of course. And another one that's at the top of his mind is, of course, Gandling. If he doesn't think he's winning this game at the moment, if he just plays all his cards and is slowly moving towards losing board, does he ever consider holding back some of these minions in order to try and pop off with one really big turn?
I think you burn that bridge when you get there. I would really favor okasinnsuke just playing everything this turn, sending it face. Alan clearly showed he struggled to clear the board last turn, so even any bit of incremental damage you get from this point would be beneficial. I think it's only bad for him to clear the Totem Goliath as well, because it's giving Alan immediate trades with the totems he gets from it, and also the taunt totem. So okasinnsuke is going for the full aggro push now. Alan gets...
That's pretty good.
I guess. Does he have board space to do everything? Because if he pops the golem, I guess he just doesn't pop it this turn.
Yeah, just trade into a 1/4.
So the note taker, honestly, Molten Blast is doing not that much here. It's clearing a 2/1, but you'll take it.
So you can clear off all but 3 power from this board. I mean, you could still pop the Totem Goliath on this turn if you wanted to, just try and lock out as much damage as possible, and then just go Molten Blast maybe without the Note Taker, because you don't deem it necessarily worthy to copy that specific spell. You have a lot of good other spells to copy.
That's true, but I kind of favor just having the Note Taker on board as a 2/3 to take more trades. So I think what I would do here, I hope that the drawing tool is working now. It's just... Yeah, okay. 5/2 into a 1/4. Molten Blast a 2/1. Nope, I drew too far.
It got there eventually, took the scenic route.
And then the Fireheart clears one of the 1/1s. He can fit in the hero power on top of that as well, and gets the healing totem, which is the best outcome for this situation, I think. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's very nice. And so now, there is 3 damage coming through, 5 with the hero power, down to 6. You're theoretically in the range of getting there with pings, and with the Void Touched Attendant, that's 9 damage. It's just a ping away from winning.
And if he plays it, is he dead on the other side? Because look how much damage Alan has, and he knows there's Molten Blast in hand right now, because if that comes on board, Alan has, what, 8, 10, 12 damage, plus 5, 17. He's not dead. He's not dead, even with the Molten Blast. But to top decks, he could just die. It's such a risk.
Yeah, it's 20, I make it as. Or, yeah, thereabouts. And, like you say, not dead, so everything goes face. He needs a little bit extra. He needs some extra burn here to reverse lethal the Shadow Priest. Oh!
Disaster, Alan! It's just one burn spell away from lethal there. Lightning Bolt or Serpent Shrine Portal or some Discovers. There were many things he could have gotten, but okasinnsuke knew that if he bothered trading that board, he maybe could have survived versus a burn for one more turn, but he would have had no win condition. He would have lost his board entirely. Took that window to go face with everything, set up the ping for the 2-turn lethal, and gets the unfavorable matchup, which we all know is a disaster in LHS.
An absolute disaster. I mean, the grin there from okasinnsuke says it all. He knows as well as we do, he wasn't supposed to win that game of Hearthstone. He did very well to do so, of course. Congratulations to him. But you have to get a little bit fortunate to be able to get the win against the Quest Charm, as he did with that perfectly timed top deck of the Void Touched Attendant, which means that Alan's best chance for a counter, only chance to win the series, is to 3-0 sweep with Shadow Priest in the mirror. Okay, sure, that's doable, obviously. Against the Rogue, yeah, okay, once again, you can get there. But then the Shaman, despite what we've just seen, don't let that fool you. This is a massive uphill climb for Alan now.
And it's not as though the mirror is that simple of a matter either. I love how you pick these key cards to be symmetrical. Gandling and his little pets, by the way. But we've seen this matchup go very gritty towards even halfway through the deck to a top deck war.
Yeah.
We've seen it go very one-sided, and now this iteration of Gandling makes it such that first person to get a good Gandling is usually in a very good spot. Maybe not necessarily if it comes at the expense of your early curve, but a lot of the cards like Voracious Reader being able to stick for an additional turn can make it run away heavily in the direction of one player more often than before. I will say though, it's kind of sketchy to keep it this early on because you should be focusing on board control. You're looking for wriggling horrors, you're looking for high buff minions, and that's exactly what Alan gets.
This hand is mega juicy. Frazzled Freshman is essentially a guaranteed body to be able to stick a Kulturan Chaplain or Wriggling Horror on the following turn. It's just way too much stats. For Alan, although I like keeping the Murloc Tiny Fin, I can understand why you do it. I also like holding it here, as he's done, to be able to give yourself a more guaranteed target for Wriggling Horror or Kulturan Chaplain, or even the Traveling Merchant. His entire hand at the moment is telling him to hold on to it for a more guaranteed buff.
This is great from Alan because obviously he can play it and say if they're going to ping that, then fine, I'm still in a good spot. But it's not just ping. There's also Guardian Og Merchant, which would also allow Okashinsuke to play one more threat, and then you lose your guaranteed Wriggling Horror on 2 targets, right? So for the reasons you laid out as well, I think it makes a lot of sense to hold on to the Tiny Fin. We'll see, depending on what Okashinsuke plays, which buff he's going to go for, and because there's a 3-2 now, it's absolutely Wriggling Horror.
Yeah, no real consideration for hero power here, is there? You're not that greedy in this matchup.
Do it a little bit later when you're top decking because your deck will give you things to do guaranteed until around turn 5, it looks like, with this hand from Alan, especially with the Raised Dead. And you always want to be keeping your hand as narrow as possible at any point if you get a Lucia or Voracious Reader. And for Okashinsuke, this is already playing from behind, and he's met with that problem of the Voracious Reader not doing anything because he has to spend time responding to the board. I do think it has to be ping here so that he can guaranteed get a Kulturan Chaplain buff on his Neophyte the next turn, but it's extremely slow.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so with Lucia now, it's not time yet. Your opponent's still at 30 health. You're never considering Raised Dead for a 0 drop just to give +1/+1 to your Traveling Merchant, are you?
I'd be pretty aggressive, but I think the pool gets a little bit better here, right? Whether it's Frazzled Freshman or in some miracle world, the Wriggling Horror, let's say Okashinsuke goes for Og Merchant on that. If that's in the res pool, absolutely worth the wait, I think. But Lucia honestly is not that exciting to me in this matchup because Alan won't have that much mana to dump with it. But it could come in handy if he's just trying to lock out the game.
Okay, so there's a lot you can play around with on this turn because you can guarantee yourself a Raised Dead Wriggling Horror. And obviously, even though that costs 1 mana, it's definitely worth considering because there's some pretty juicy value trades that you can look at here.
So what he can do is double trade the two attack minions into the Neophyte. So you start with the Wriggling and then raise that to guarantee to get the Wriggling. You don't quite get the nice value trade of the 4-5 and the 3-4, but I think it's fine, right? Because going 4-5 into 3-4 actually leaves the Merchant within pingable range. So I'd rather it trade into the 2-3.
That's true. I think if we're going down that route, though, although I was raising the proposition of Raised Dead originally, I think I like Desk Imp, Kulturan, Hero Power. Like, Raised Dead will be good next turn. Still, you can probably spend all your mana with the Hero Power as well. And this is still actually just really clean. You trade in your Wriggling Horror, you still end up with a big minion that's unkillable by just Hero Power. And then Raised Dead for 0 mana next turn. Perfect. Gives you the refill you need.
It is certainly the most mana efficient. I think I was maybe tunneling on guaranteeing the Wriggling because Raised Dead won't be guaranteed Wriggling after a ping from Okashinsuke here, but Alan is so far ahead on board that any Raised Dead minion would be decent here. Occult Neophytes are doing very little for Okashinsuke as they almost certainly don't have a big impact in the matchup. They are a very bad size versus the Priest Hero Power, but Okashinsuke is going to try and fight back now with his own Wriggling. Feel like it's probably too late, but we'll see from Alan. I mean, he can guarantee the Wriggling.
It's still guaranteed, and Lucia at this point is actually looking pretty juicy because you're guaranteed 0 cost and Wriggling Horror, right? You can just play everything and then I don't know, imprisoned coin Alusha? Is that enough to stop them from being able to fight back? They obviously have some amount of board presence, but you're pushing so much damage.
I guess. I mean, the Alusha does give okasinnsuke only one card to play next turn, which is pretty powerful. The 1/3 body on board isn't super relevant, but I wonder if, honestly, Alan would rather just get a ping to face here. If you can set up a 2-turn lethal with the ping, then I think that's better than Alusha, but obviously there's some value to making sure your opponent can only play one card as opposed to 2 or 3 next turn via Alusha.
So in terms of what we're buffing and trading, the 1/1 into the Wriggling Horror obviously makes sense as like a first idea, and then you can just go nothing but value trades if you want to and keep your entire board alive apart from that 1/1.
Seems pretty strong. Interesting, he's going Alusha before the Homunculus, potentially playing something from okasinnsuke's hand. I mean, he knows that the Homunculus is very useless to okasinnsuke in this position, so I think it's fine. But I don't know, I think I still kind of valued playing it for some reason.
For some reason, just for sentimental
I can't think
value.
of one, yeah. I thought that the 1/1 would go in the 2/1 so there would be board space, but he did end up going for nothing but VTs, like you said.
This is the analysis we're here for, Gia. Because I want to, you can't tell me otherwise.
Sorry.
It's better than you're going to get out of me. But okasinnsuke obviously doesn't want to activate the Twilight Deceptor because he doesn't want to deal damage to himself just to play more minions. He realizes he's just on the brink of death. He can stay alive at 2 health here, and then his opponent has very little in terms of value.
He could die this turn to a Wriggling, or just die in 2 turns with a guaranteed ping. It was a win either way for Alan. Sorry for any hesitations I had about the Alusha. As I tried to figure out an explanation, I realized couldn't think of one. It wasn't there. Alan gets a very clean win off the back of an aggressive mulligan for high health minions that trade well. That is the name of the game with the Priest Mirror. We didn't really see a Gandling come into the equation, but without that, there's not very much counterplay if you have to be behind on board every turn and let your opponent dictate how the trades go.
Yeah, it was very simple. Alan had the good hand. I think he played it very well. You know, as we were saying, holding onto that 0-cost card, taking all the correct trades. It was pretty simple. And okasinnsuke just had a load of garbage. He tried as best as he could, but with no 0 or 1-cost minions, you're just behind right from the get-go, which means the Priest unable to get the job done entirely for okasinnsuke. He does have to lean on one of his other 2 remaining decks, that being Rogue in the Garrote Rogue and the Quest Shaman. And with the Shaman against the Priest now that he's lining up first of all, he has still, Gia, got himself, as we predicted at the start of this series, a very good matchup against the Priest. I would be surprised if we see twice in one series Priest beating Shaman.
Yeah, that feels very unlikely, but obviously not impossible. I find that if Shaman completely misses on Perpetual Flame and Lightning Bloom, they are very helpless versus Priest's first couple board pushes. There is, you know, some healing in the Shaman, but it is situational. The Canal Slogger probably only gets 6 healing done, and then the Priest either pings it off. Maybe if you're able to take a good trade versus a 1-attack minion, it can get there, but it can sometimes be a little bit late, so I'm not going to count Alan out of it yet. If I'm going to look at the 2 Shaman builds, it seems like they're card for card... Oh, sorry, 29 cards the same. Alan only running 1 Primal Dungeoneer, whereas okasinnsuke has cut them all together for an Earth Elemental, it looks like. And in terms of this matchup, I honestly don't know which one you'd rather have. The Earth Elemental can be pretty relevant if you play it early as a big taunt. But for now, obviously, this opening hand, I think it's got to go for okasinnsuke. The Canal Sloggers are important later, but for now, gotta find the blooms, gotta find the Perpetual Flame.
Yeah, exactly. We are just looking for the good stuff, the early plays. The note-taker guidance is interesting. You're probably just ending up playing the note-taker on 2, I would guess here. But with the bloom, this is where things get a little bit spicy. Now there's a lot of flexibility in this hand. Yeah,
with the note-taker as well, we could potentially see just everything played next turn and hope you get something proactive from guidance. More likely, if Okashinsuke gets a guaranteed development overload spell like Serpentine Portal or Feral Spirit, he will prioritize that. But there's not zero merit to just going in with the immediate unlock on the first quest completion, because he can get decent things from guidance, and also just the 2-3 on board is pretty good versus Priest.
It is, yeah. I'm kind of thinking it could be Bloom, Note Taker, double guidance as well, rather than double Bloom. But wow, with double Note Taker, how do you even play this? Like, you can go, obviously, Note Taker, Bloom, Note Taker, double guidance, and still be left with a Bloom in hand and a bunch of spells. That sounds pretty powerful. You unlock your crystals as well. Oh, no, it would have to be Note Taker, Bloom, Note Taker, Bloom, double guidance, or Note Taker, Bloom, Bloom, Note Taker, double guidance. There's a lot of different ways you can play it, but I think Okashinsuke has found it, despite all my blabbering about what the correct way to go about is, because this gets stats on board and leaves him with a lot of refill as well.
This is my favorite play in Quest Shaman. You just cycle the blooms on the note takers, and you essentially just get a 0 mana 2-3 on board, which is amazing versus aggro. Doesn't end up with anything particularly proactive. Lightning Bolt at the end there was pretty interesting, but for now, at least he has enough removal. And for Alan here, the Wriggling Horror, while the buffs are nice, it doesn't still actually give him any good value trades, I think.
Yeah, it's a very awkward turn, right? Because you could, like, in a way, Hero Power is the best thing on this turn. You can just go, like, Hero Power trade, because dealing that 2 damage is really nice, and then you can obviously lead up into Coin Kultaran plus Wriggling Horror. But if your board gets cleared on the following turn, or even if you're just left with 1 minion, it still makes it a lot more awkward as to how you proceed.
Going with the health instead. I think the problem with the Wriggling Horror this turn, obviously you could have traded a 1-1 and then a 2-attack minion in, but then the Void Touched Attendant, if that was the minion you traded in, could have then been VT'd by the Note Taker on the other side. So he's choosing to actually just make it the most expensive for Okashinsuke to actually VT down the Void Touched Attendant here. No Perpetual Flame makes this turn quite awkward, but it's going to see what's in the guidance. There's another Bolt. That's insane.
Second Bolt is insane. He can proc second quest on this turn if he wants to, and clear off the entire board bar a 1-1. That has to be the play. You can even unlock next turn with the Overdraft. That's
perfect.
Absurd.
Next turn, he gets to play Overdraft for 3 damage and then just follow up with Charge Call for a 7 drop. That's so nuts.
Yeah. I think it's...
already...
oh, no, yeah, you're right. It would be 7. Yeah, just absolutely insane.
I think Alan needs Gandling or Bust. And even then, the Gandling needs to come with a Raise Dead.
He needs a miracle. He needs an absolute miracle. This is over at this point. Like, Okashinsuke has the value to follow up. He could even theoretically trade his Overdraft if he absolutely has to. I don't think he will, obviously. I think it's just Charge Call and win the game that way. But you're just never winning back the board as Alan.
He can make Overdraft unplayable, though, with the Cult Neophyte and coin out a ping. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Obviously, the Neophyte is dead on board to one of the 2-2s. I think you end up probably pinging the 3-3, so you can trade that instead and not get the 1-1 VT'd, but it's not going Neophyte here. Not to say that's wrong to hold it back. We can see Okashinsuke's hand, and this is going to be the simplest turn ever. Right?
Yeah, like, you could even fit in Perpetual Flame as well in order to get yourself an 8-drop if you really wanted to. Although I think that's probably too valuable to save.
Yeah, and it would have to get the 8-drop next turn, right?
Oh, right, sorry, yeah, of course. I was factoring 1 too many mana.
Alabaster, insult to injury, honestly. Alan has no resources. If he gets the best draw in his deck, which is a Gandling, then Okashinsuke can play it for 1 mana. I wonder what Ilusha does with this hand, because Alan could play Ilusha and then after the coin, he can play the 1-mana illusion okashinsuke's hand. Not the case.
That's pretty good, and there it is. Alan throws it down. Alabaster, the Alan Bester, and okashinsuke is winning 3 games to 1, getting both the expected win with the Shaman against the Priest and getting the unexpected win with the Priest against the Shaman. I think overall, very well played from okashinsuke. He kind of like won the games where he got a good hand, lost the games where he got a bad hand, finishing 3-1 against Alan. But overall, I do think he made the best he could out of those good hands. And it means that Alan is back down to another 1-point week. Only 2 points after a full 4 weeks of play. It breaks my heart to say it, but it's just looking more and more like Alan is going to be firmly in that relegation zone.
Oh, I really hate to say it as well. Still a couple weeks remaining, 5, 6, and 7. Any win in one of those weeks is a huge propel, but I don't know if Alan necessarily has the time. It's going to be tough, but for okashinsuke, very happy to see him take a win as well. I think he is a